Good morning from gardening at Dwensa here in Ireland, and today is the 2nd of April. Such a beautiful sunny morning. I felt I had to rush out here with the camera and just show you what's been happening in the spring garden since our very last visit. And our very last visit was not very long ago, but this year I just feel I want to show you spring happening in slow motion, and there are exciting things to see. Some new flowers that sprung up after the rain, and also the very first tulip. So come with me and let's have a look at my garden in April. And today we are starting off from a different point. We're starting off from over by the hellebores. And the first thing you're going to notice is that the grass has been cut because our mower has finally been fixed and finally we can get the grass sharp looking. I mentioned last time how the hellebores were kind of near the end of their flowering, but it seems they've got quite a bit more left to give. And the hyacinths are still looking really, really good at the moment. There we go. And just over here at the back of the hellebore bed, we have a little cutie. And this is called Omphalodes Starry Eyes, an Irish cultivar with little blue flowers and white edge. And this is the kind of thing you have to get right down and dirty with, right close up and personal to see it in all its proper detail. Now this little guy does seed about a bit, but it's not a good thing because the seedlings invariably revert to the original form and are just blue, and if you leave them where they are in the border, then they might seed inside the parent plant and overrun it. So the seedlings that are blue do need to be weeded out every now and again. So off we go into the garden. Oh, I love when the grass is cut. It just adds such a sense of formality, I guess, but just a sense of order. And now let's have a look at this border here. Now this border is shaping up nicely to be full of good things. It's full of promise at the moment. See how the clumps of geranium have really clumped up, I guess, since we were last looking at it. And the peonies, that red foliage thing there just on the right is a peony, and yes, it's really gotten going. And just behind over here is what I fondly refer to as my Melanoselinum forest. Now Melanoselinum is a beautiful plant from the Madeira island just off of Africa, and it produces these beautiful, beautiful red leaves in spring. And this plant seeds about readily, which is why I have a forest of it. And when you plant it so that it's in slight shade like I've done here, then it grows taller, it reaches for the light. And last year all of these plants were taller than me, so I want to maintain that. I think it was a lovely, lovely feature here in the border, and I'm going to continue with this Melanoselinum forest. And that work involved just moving some seedlings about this year. So as I said, it seeds about, and there were seedlings popping up here and there, most of which I removed, but some of them I replanted in the centre of the clump just to maintain symmetry. In the border, the tulips are preparing to flower, and at this stage they're really, really strong looking with vibrant glaucous foliage, and the flower heads, you can see them already, although they're still green. This here is a healthy clump of Veratrum. Now normally the Veratrum I grow is very much a woodland plant, but this one is much taller and flowers much earlier and disappears, or I mean it's leaves degrade much earlier as well. So it's a different animal to the other one I've talked about before, but it's still good to have, and that new foliage is always wonderful. Now, if we look through this border, you'll see that there are spaces, there are gaps where it looks like there's nothing growing. And indeed, when the plants that are here fill up, they will indeed cover up some of that space, but there are gaps. And I addressed that yesterday by planting some glorious annual poppies. So these poppies, called Hungarian blue, were just planted in situ in the border in little drills and watered in, and hopefully they will flower beautifully for me this year. And I decided to keep with the pastel theme here in this border, and so hence the blue poppies. And now we're going to leave behind that border there, which I fondly call my boggart bed, and head up to this other section of the garden. But just before I do, there are some little things on the left I want to show you. And the first thing I want to show you is Hacquetia Thor, which I've talked about quite a bit, but it's a glorious variegated plant that I divided last year, and I divided it into 16 plants, and now in spring they're beginning to bulk up. And the good news is that I can actually count 15 of those 16 plants, which is quite a good return, I think, for something that just covered a small space before. And just over here you can see that Anemone blanda is still looking good, and a pulmonaria beside it. One of the really great things about having naturally acidic soil is that you can grow rhododendrons, and wait till you see this rhododendron in flower. It's a Cilipensis, one of the earliest flowering rhododendrons, and it's absolutely magnificent. And just to the right of it we have the Sarcococca, which is a bush I featured recently because it produces gloriously scented flowers in spring. So as you can see, it's downtime, and that's the good thing about having a large garden. You can afford to grow things that have just one season of interest. Now I've clipped the bush back after flowering just to neaten it up a bit. And just below it you will see lots and lots of seedlings in the ground, and these are my Aquilegia, which do seed about, as I mentioned in the Aquilegia video, but too much really for my liking. And leaving that stuff behind and just very quickly crossing over to the other side, we have the Magnolia tree, which, well, this one has buds but no flowers yet. And aren't those buds so full of promise? I like this magnolia because the buds are so pink, whereas my other magnolias have very much white buds. They're very tactile looking, almost like silk. So leaving Magnolia Star Wars behind, we will now progress up this side of the border where I have some cute little primulas. And this is one of my absolute favourites. It's called Dawn Ansell. Beautiful double cream flowers, very neat habit, and very good foliage. And this one here is Rosanna White, and I guess we'd better have a quick close-up of her. So she has really pretty flowers with white stripes, quite small, and the dark foliage. And the dark foliage always sounds like a great idea when you read about these primroses in winter or in summer, I guess. But I think that in spring, green foliage poking up above the dark earth looks better, because the dark foliage, well, it just looks like the earth. And those are volunteer poppies you see dotted in among the border. I'm going to have so many poppies. And moving over to the other side of this walkway, we find that barbatum, Rhododendron barbatum, is still flowering well. As I mentioned before, a bit of a lopsided flowering this year, but I think I have 6 clusters of the flowers, which is a good result, and yeah, hopefully it'll go on to do better things. And just behind it we have one of the surviving Echiums, which is that one there. And it was carnage in the garden last winter with the Echiums. I lost almost all of the full-sized Echiums, but I'm not worried because there is plenty of seed in the ground, and the seed, as we know, is hardy even if the established plants aren't. And right here we have some Meconopsis, and I'm going to pull you in closer so we can have a look at this glorious foliage. Now these are the yellow flowering Meconopsis, not the blue ones. Oh, and by the way, Danielle from the North Lawn channel, which I'll link to at the end of this video, recently made a video about the blue poppy or the blue Meconopsis, and she talked about it in quite some length. You must go and check out her channel if you are interested in outdoor gardening. Then Danielle is a proper outdoor gardener, and she grows a variety of beautiful flowers because she's very much interested in cut flowers, so do go and check that out. And back to my Meconopsis, can you see how the water just sits on the petals? So beautiful. And the foliage on the blue Meconopsis is quite gorgeous, but the yellow one just takes the biscuit as far as I'm concerned. And here, hiding because it's not opening the flowers yet. The flowers aren't open because there's enough sun. And this is the first of the wood anemones to open up in the garden. And this is a little Irish cultivar called Lucy's Wood that I divided and planted around here last year, and I'm so delighted to see it in flower. And you can see how these tulips are progressing. That's the Artemisia I mentioned in my recent foliage plant, looking really good and meaty at the moment, but the tulips behind are really coming on, and I think the next garden tour video I give you will be to showcase the tulips. And while we're up this end, I had better point out these 2 primroses. So the one on the left is one I grew from seed a few years ago. A hefty looking clump now at this stage, so it can be divided. And the one on the right is a polyanthus primrose with really sweet flowers. I mean, these are really gorgeous, almost like an auricula. But this is a perfectly garden worthy hardy plant that can be divided now actually, so we'll see it go further. But the bad thing, I suppose, is that these are so dainty, they're actually hard to notice in a border. So we have made it up that path, and now we are sitting with the camera on the stone table, and I just wanted to show you in here how well the podophyllum has done since I moved it. And moving around a bit further, we have the sun in our eyes, but down at ground level, that's where it's all happening. And that's where I have lots more tulips coming up. These are ones I planted last autumn, as well as some that were already there. And we also have a little primrose that, you know, yeah, it's kind of meh. And I think I'm going to get rid of it and replace it for something better. And now we are just beyond the table, which obviously you can see just there. But what I have to show you is, wait for it. It's the first of the tulips that I planted last year, the first one to come into flower. Okay, so it's not open fully yet, but it is so full of promise that I'm absolutely brimming with anticipation. This, of course, is not a new tulip to my garden. It's the Forestiana one called Purissima, and I have grown this in different places for many years, and it is very reliable and always comes back. And I think it looks glorious here with that super little yellow primrose. And as you'll recall, this is one that I have no ID for, but it has done really well. Very happy with it. And before we leave this section of the garden, I just want to show you something quite special that's poking up here. And I don't mean that red primrose down the front, although it is good. And this one really does look like red roses, doesn't it? And just beyond the yellow primrose, we have a wood anemone, and this is a little cutie. You can see it has very dark foliage, which is a good, well, I mean, it's a good point. Now, I have to tell you, I have a confession to make. I bought this wood anemone for its name, and it's called Parlez Vous, which was enough to entice me. However, I don't think it's substantially different from some other wood anemones, like the Lucy's wood we just saw, or Robinsoniana, although the foliage seems to be a tad darker. So we came from over there to the right, and in a moment we'll go down that path where it's all happening. But before we do that, I want to take you over to examine the hyacinths. Now, these hyacinths are called pink pearl, and I'm getting bonus this year because each bulb seems to be sending up 2 flower spikes. I'm quite pleased with how well these have done, and the fact that the little glory of the snow, the blue flower, is dotted in among it is an added bonus. There are also some of the Dawn Ansell Primula in there, and I'm thinking I might just divide that from elsewhere in the garden where it's done really well and dot it in among the hyacinth when it's time to divide primroses. The peonies are really getting going now, and I really must get in here and put a hoop around that one. So the next step is to go down the path, but before we do have to take a little look at the Magnolia. And Magnolia stellata is looking good, not fully open yet, but I'd say probably about halfway there. It does have a number of buds that are still unopened and a few that are still forming, I think. So it's going to be a good display this year. And here we have one that's fully open, just to give you an idea of where it gets its name from. Stellata, like a star. Down at its feet we have the daffodil, Thalia, still looking good, and one of my favourite primroses, Marie Careuse, which is that double purple down there, and she's still looking super. And of course the trick to getting primroses to last a long time is to deadhead. Yes, you do have to get down on your hands and knees and deadhead. So right here we have a couple that have gone over past their best by, and just with my nail I just stick it into the stem and just break off the flower, whoops, and take it out, and that'll just encourage the plant to make more flowers. And if you bite your nails, well, you're going to find this difficult. And we have lots more to see, but oh no, I think they're closed. The trillium from behind continues to open, so not quite there yet, but still looking good. And I do hope that I can get a big clump of trilliums to establish in this part of the garden, because trilliums behind and sanguinaria in front is a winning combination. So just over here We also have the erythroniums, which have just opened. And this guy also wants to nod down today. We're not having much luck really, but yeah. Okay, next time we come back we are going to see all of these plants in glorious flower. I bet we are. Back there we have the little cherry tree, still looking good. And here we're on the other side of the Melanoselinum, and we can see how attractive they are. And moving over to the other side we can see the daffodils, and at this stage the white ones are tending to go over, but I do have a lot of the yellow with the orange centre. It's a kind of double one, and this has got to be one of my absolute favourites. Absolutely love this one. At this stage the white daffodils can be dead-headed, and the way I prefer to do it is to just nip them off at the top of the stem. So here, and in this way you remove the place where they would make seed. Now I prefer to leave the stem in place because it continues to photosynthesize and provide goodness for the plant. You don't have to deadhead your daffodils if you're hoping that they will seed about, but I, on the other hand, deadhead my daffodils because I want to maintain big bulbs for the cultivars that I already have in place. These, if they are even fertile, they wouldn't come true from seed, so I just take them out. And the hyacinths coming, I was going to say coming to the end of their flowering, but those white ones at the front really still look quite meaty. Peonies progressing nicely, and this one has a hoop, if you can see it there. It's kind of a square metal hoop. And that brings us to the end of this first garden tour of April, which I hope you enjoyed. If there's something you would have liked me to talk more about during the tour, then do drop that comment down below, preferably with a coordinate in the video where you saw the plant in question, because otherwise it can be hard for me to know what you're talking about. And anyway, hope you enjoyed the video, and check back soon for, I guess, a tulip flowering. Hope you have a wonderful day in your own garden. Bye!